I think everybody remembers that back in the 90s, George Michael and Prince had these famous strikes against, were both of them going against Warner Brothers? Anyway, they refused to release recordings. I think Prince actually would release things, but he refused to do it under his own name. George Michael just, I think he was suing, maybe it was Sony. Anyway, those were two real famous kind of strikes that took place in the 90s. But did you also realize or remember that one of my favorite bands, XTC, were in a similar predicament with Virgin? Um, After releasing Nonsuch in 1992, Andy went to Virgin a year later with a group of songs that were, let's say, a little bit not politically correct at the time. There were sexual overtones and undertones, odd titles, and Virgin just kind of put the kibosh on that project out of hand. So Andy, being the leader, the de facto leader of XTC at that point, as he always was, really, he decided, well, we're not going to do any recording for Virgin, and Virgin Records eventually blinked, and they let XTC out of the contract. I think that happened around 1997, maybe 1998. Anyway, 7 years after the release of Nonsuch, we finally got Apple Venus Volume 1, which was released in 1999 under the Cooking Vinyl umbrella. So they went indie at that point in time. All of that to say, today's topic is actually on uh, the incredible 92 album Nonsuch. I did an XTC ranking video over a year ago, and most people will consider Nonsuch as a second tier XTC album. Now, what do we consider first tier albums? Definitely Skylarking, English Settlement, Black Sea. Some people will go as far as to put Apple Venus Volume 1 in the upper tier. Um, I have a hard time settling on my top three, but I do recall, I think I had Nonsuch as either number 4 or number 5 in my ranking. I'll have to go back and check. I'm going to drop a link to that ranking video if you haven't seen it before in the description below. Uh, anyway, I was really, really happy to pick up the late 2020 reissue of Nonsuch. It was issued on 200-gram vinyl records. It was a double album as it was originally configured as well back in 1992. Released on the Ape imprint, which is Andy is associated with, and he signed off on the final vinyl master. Steven Wilson was involved in a remix, and as far back as 2013, they put out a DVD with a 5.1 mix included that Steven Wilson had worked on. The original mix was completed by Nick Davis and produced. The album was produced by Gus Dudgeon. It was recorded over a 4-month period at Chipping Norton Studios in Oxfordshire, and as is often the case, and there was a pattern with Andy. He had a hard time. They had a hard time figuring out who was going to produce Nonsuch, and they finally settled on Gus Dudgeon after looking at a couple of other possibilities. One, which almost happened, Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham were going to team up again and work on the album like they had on Black Sea and English Settlement. Lillywhite was overscheduled and overbooked and couldn't make it happen. So then they started talking to none other than John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. And John Paul Jones was interested in working with XTC, but apparently the fee was too high, so they had to move on. Finally, they settled on legendary producer Gus Dudgeon, who had done all those fantastic albums with Elton John and others. And from the beginning, there are reports out there that Andy and Gus Dudgeon were butting heads. Nothing new in XTC land if you think about the history of Andy and different record producers. They did a fantastic job with this reissue. This is the reproduction of the artwork, and then they have all of the songs, and they all have their kind of cool little motif. I read somewhere that they took the artwork, it's an old illustration from the 15 or 1600s of a castle. And then, unlike the original pressing, this has been issued in a gatefold, which is nice. Overall, super happy with this reissue. But a couple days ago, I was shocked to find an original UK pressing from 1992 out at a shop in Boulder, Colorado. Never thought I would stumble across that album here in Colorado. I know that the original was a limited release. They didn't even do a US issue, so it was only in the UK and then in Europe as well. Maybe South America. I'll have to look at Discogs, but let me show you that album. So let's kind of compare. This is the original, and they had the artistic direction to use a little more gold at the top so that the actual title and the band name showed up a little bit better than this. I do prefer the look of this. Now, what I don't like is we got the double album in a single sleeve, so no gatefold. The two records were presented in cardstock inners, which is nice. There is that original photography of the threesome right there. What a fantastic band. And also very cool, originally these cardboard inners included a plastic poly sleeve to protect the records. There's the original record right there. You can see that they did the song listing. Both sides were listed on one side, and then they had a custom label with that castle artwork on the opposite. Really nice, flat, dynamic vinyl. I would say this was maybe 100 grams at best. Vinyl records at that point in time in the early 90s were not of a reissue audiophile quality, so nowhere near 180 or even 200 grams. This is the reissue sleeve. So again, two records spread across this double album, or the double album spread across two 33 1/3 records. There's a whole kind of listing of the whole reissue program that Ape is doing for XTC. And these are perfectly flat, beautiful records, 200 gram, with that kind of specialty Ape XTC label. Again, I love this album, and when I put on the UK original pressing, I was shocked by the detail, the clarity, the great use of some stereo panning and separation of instruments. You know, the 1-2 punch leading off the album, Andy's fantastic, the Ballad of Peter Pumpkinhead, and then moving in, Your Bird performs a great Colin Moulding track. There's 17 songs on this album, 13 by Andy, 4 by Colin. But what a way to start the album with Pumpkinhead. You've got that incredible kind of church bell chiming going on in the background, which was Dave Gregory's idea. And great, great, great kind of churning guitars, jangle pop, pop perfection is Peter Pumpkinhead, if you ask me. And then kind of segueing into Colin's kind of effervescent Your Bird Performs. On the second verse, we hear those little birds chirping that was obviously kind of dubbed in for effect. This album just sounds incredible. And if I compare it to the reissue, I don't know if it's, if I'm going to be, if I was influenced by the shock and awe and wonder of finding the UK original and maybe wanting that to sound better than the reissue. But to my ears on my system, the UK original barely beats out the fantastic reissue. If you have a reissue or if you don't, I can highly recommend this reissue. The fact that it's presented in a gatefold, 200 gram, perfectly flat, perfectly centered records, tons of clarity. There are 2 or 3 songs where I thought there was a bit of shrillness and maybe a little bit even fatiguing happening, when I was listening to that, to those songs. And I didn't really get that from the original pressing. So take that what you will. I mean, this was a fully digital recording in 1992 anyway. So it's not like we can say, oh, I've got a digital reissue compared to my analog original. That's not the case here. They're both digital records. But I think that the original just kind of captures things just by a nose a bit better, as listening to both back to back a few times now over the last couple days. I will say that this is, I don't know, I might have to look at my XTC ranking again. This is really the culmination, especially after Oranges and Lemons in 1989. That in the US was a very, very popular record. I think it was ranked as #1 for 1989 on the college rock charts. And the band performed live on David Letterman, doing King for a Day. They hadn't performed in a live setting for 7 years. The great thing about Nonsuch is the band performed live on a UK television program doing Books Are Burning, which Books Are Burning is an absolute masterpiece by Andy Partridge. In the live setting, Dave Gregory was just on Hammond organ, and the cool thing about Books Are Burning, if you know the song, it ends with a series of 4 guitar solos. And Andy, on the recording, takes the first and third, and then Dave Gregory takes the second and fourth. And they all have a little bit of a slightly distinctive tone and variety to them. And to see Andy take care of all 4 of those solos as the fade out and the credits come up on that live performance, it was exhilarating, it was breathtaking, it was an amazing performance. It made you thinking back, why couldn't these guys play live a little, Andy, get over it, please. I wish they would have had some more live performances. Also on Nonsuch, after Terry Chambers had left during Mummer, they were using different drummers up until the end, and they chose Dave Maddox from Fairport Convention fame, and he is just a great in the pocket, incredible groove, incredible feel. Another thing about the recording on Pumpkinhead, particularly the decay of those big cymbal hits that accentuate the different phrases in the song. I think the decay is a little more distinct. It lasts a little longer. It's a little more present on that UK pressing than the reissue. That's a minor thing, but a detail that I did notice. Okay, that is my kind of wrap up. Where's my other album? That's my kind of wrap up for this album. There's my there's my thumbnail. I love this album. I love XTC. I need to go back and listen to Apple Venus and Wasp Star again. I have both of those reissues on vinyl. Highly recommended as well because I don't think they ever came out on vinyl. So get those if they're still in print if you can.